Good morning, everyone. Donald Trump has been talking about cutting ties with the WHO since he defunded the WHO. And this matters to Canada because when he defunded the WHO, Canada stepped in to fill in the gaps for that funding. So instead of Donald Trump and the United States donating or giving $450 million, Canada gave 850 million Canadian dollars, and that resulted in 550 million, according to Dr. Tedros's tweet in WHO funding. So this is notable for Canada to pay attention to. When Donald Trump does something, it does impact Canada. And yesterday, he cut ties with the WHO. So here he is making that announcement and for his reasoning behind it. And it's interesting to me that Canada continues to align more with China than with our historical ally, the United States, our like geographically close ally, a large land border. It seems very strange to be aligning more and more closely with China. It does. So here we go. Donald Trump.
China has total control over the World Health Organization, despite only paying $40 million per year compared to what the United States has been paying, which is approximately $450 million a year. We have detailed the reforms that it must make and engage with them directly, but they have refused to act. Because they have failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms, we will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent global public health needs. China.
And so with that, Donald Trump is cutting ties with the UN affiliated WHO, and that's notable, right? And if they're not doing what they said they were going to do, if they're listening to rhetoric over doing their own investigations, if they're pushing that rhetoric in the face of public safety, if they're not holding people accountable, like China, for not giving out proper information, like human-to-human transmission, in a reasonable amount of time, they knew in December 2019. If we're not going to have agencies like the WHO to actually follow through on those promises, then should we be giving them money? Should Canada be stepping in to fill in those gaps? I think no, right? I think very clearly no, and I've said as much previously as well. And it's interesting to watch the United States have steady leadership and say, this is what we expect very clearly. And I don't think this is about how much the United States spends at the WHO. I think that the United States has an expectation that the WHO do its job. I don't think that the United States would disparage spending $450 million on an agency that dutifully did what the WHO is supposed to do, which is to investigate outbreaks and to hold countries accountable and to help countries get through outbreaks, et cetera, et cetera. But what they did was hold water for China, lie for China, and say, I mean, all sorts of insane things up until the middle of February, and even beyond the end of February. Like what they're even saying now is well, I mean, I don't even know how to communicate. It's inappropriate, right? Like they're not clearly showing what's happening on the ground. They're using the worst case scenarios like New York, like the care homes in Ontario, to push the narrative, and it's frustrating. And a lot of people are checking out, right? A lot of the coverage just isn't interesting anymore. People are looking around and not seeing what the promised surge, right? Or even a second, this second wave that they're promising. Where is that happening anywhere in the world? So again, I say I don't think that Trump would be, or the United States would be, worried about funding an agency that was actually holding leadership in countries accountable, talking about, in good faith doing the job they say they do, but they don't do it, right? Just like the inspectors in the long-term care homes, right? They're not doing the inspections, and so they shouldn't feel upset when people say, hey, like this job wasn't done, right? And that's what Trump's saying here on the world stage to the WHO. Back home, Globe and Mail is reporting 4-hour limit on MPs to review pandemic spending. Unfortunate to say the least, PBO says. Parliament's spending watchdog told MPs it's unfortunate to say the least that a government motion approved this week to suspend regular House of Commons sittings will limit a review of billions in COVID-19 spending to no more than 4 hours. It comes up as a very expensive 4 hours potentially for Canadian taxpayers, Parliamentary Budget Officer Yves Giroux told MPs Friday during a video appearance before the House of Commons Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The amount of scrutiny for this unprecedented spending would also be unprecedented, but for the wrong reasons. The House of Commons voted Tuesday to suspend regular sittings for 4 months, citing safety concerns due to the novel coronavirus. The suspension arrangement schedules 4 sitting days during that period, including June 17th, when MPs will review and approve billions in coronavirus-related spending. NDP MPs and one Green Party MP voted in favor of the government motion, while Conservatives and Bloc Québécois MPs were opposed. Government spending must be approved by Parliament through a process called the spending estimates. The next round of spending estimates is due to be released in early June and will then be approved during the June 17th sitting after no more than 4 hours of debate, according to the motion approved this week. I mean, that means there's a lot of money that's been spent over the last month. Like, the promises on the doorstep have to go through this parliamentary approval process, but Parliament's suspended, so there's no process to go through. So if you have an issue with one piece of that spending package, because it's going to get all wrapped together, right? So if you have an issue with one piece of that, you only have 4 hours to convince, well, you have up until the 17th of June to convince the party bosses that your issue is the issue that should be debated. And you have to prioritize. And realistically, the Liberals are going to run the clock. Like, this is a football game, right? And so the Liberals are going to push the bill the way they want the bill. And then people are going to say, push the spending the way they want the spending. And that's the spending they're doing day by day. And they are planning this, right? It's not fly by the seat of your pants, who wants money this morning. It's a plan. They're talking about this. So they put this package together, and then people look at it and say, okay, this should be discussed, this should be discussed, this should be discussed. And you get more than 6, good luck getting anything else, right? In 4 hours. So that's the problem here. That's what I'm saying yesterday, the work's not getting done. These are the types of checks and balances that are suspended because of safety. Whose safety, right? Like, and I understand they're saying, oh, COVID-19, and if it spreads through the House of Commons and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. We've got ways to work around that still to get a lot of this stuff done, and it's not getting done because, again, emergencies, and the NDP and the Liberals have agreed to suspend Parliament for 4 months. That's essentially a proroguing, right? Like, and without having to go to the Governor General, right? It's unfortunate. Anyway, quote, these estimates are very likely to include dozens of billions of dollars in new spending, if not over $100 billion in new spending, and to have only a committee of the whole House of Commons look at that for a maximum of 4 hours. To me, it's unfortunate to say the least, Mr. Giroux told MPs, because there will be very little opportunity for parliamentarians to look at these important amounts of spending and to hold the government to account on what amounts to unprecedented spending. So, in my opinion, it would have been better to allow for more scrutiny. The NDP agreed to support the minority Liberal government in exchange for a pledge to work with the provinces on a plan to implement a national program allowing for 10 paid sick days per year. Liberals and NDP MPs said parliamentary scrutiny will continue during the suspension through meetings of the temporary COVID-19 committee, which meets 4 days a week on the floor of the House of Commons until June 17th. The facade of meeting in the House, right? Back to this. I scroll down a little bit. In an interview, Mr. Macaulay noted that normally federal ministers would have to appear before relevant committees with their officials to defend their spending proposals and explain how the money will be used. Quote, none of that will exist now, he said. It's a complete abdication of parliamentary responsibility, and frankly, to me, an attack on the very basis of what Parliament is, which is the oversight of spending. When the Liberals and NDP announced their arrangement earlier this week, it was not clear whether Ottawa, the provinces, or private sector employers would be expected to cover the cost of additional sick days for workers. During his daily news conference, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Ottawa would cover a substantial portion of the cost. I just want to remind everyone there is one taxpayer. That's you and me, right? It's not some other fictional taxpayer. One taxpayer, right? Back to this. Mr. Trudeau said that during a call Thursday with provincial and territorial premiers, concerns were expressed that adding new costs on employers in terms of additional sick day obligations would harm the economic recovery. Quote, I assured them that the federal government will provide a major share of this support for people who need sick leave, said Mr. Trudeau, adding that it will be important to have measures in place by the fall so workers can afford to stay home when they are sick. Federal spending announcements to date related to the COVID-19 adds up to $152.8 billion, according to the latest Financial Department update released Thursday. When combined with lower tax revenues, the PBO has said this year's federal deficit could exceed $250 billion, compared to the government's pre-pandemic projection in December of $28.1 billion. I mean, even the $28.1 billion was a lot of money, right? But we're just in like other territory. And if you add the provincial debt, like we're at $350 billion in provincial debt too in Ontario, right? Like debt service is a thing. It's a thing, right? If you max out your credit card and then the credit card companies, the minimum balance you have to spend every day or every month keeps going up. And then if your salary remains the same or declines a little bit, or, you know, you go through an emergency like COVID-19 and you don't have any money, but your credit card still wants to be paid. The credit card company still needs to be paid. The bills keep coming, the calls keep coming, and it keeps going up, right? Because the debt service has not been happening and the debt has ballooned, but you're not getting anything for it, right? Interest rates. This is like, it's frustrating. It's frustrating because how do you get out from under that, right? It's frustrating. And having the leadership abdicate the responsibility in this way as well. They're running away from it. Federal level, they're running a committee 4 days a week, but it's a COVID-19 committee, and finances. I guess financial conversations aren't part of that committee. I'm not sure. But in New Brunswick, and I thought that they had their stuff together, but it looks like they're shutting down their legislative committee, their legislative assembly, as well. And I don't really see a reason for it. There's a resurgence of cases and people are returning home, and they decide to shut the legislature until June 9th and then until September. It's effectively shut until September. What? Right? Like, I just, why is the whole country shut down for this? Other countries aren't shutting down in this way, right? Like, other countries are able to govern themselves. Other provinces are able to govern themselves. What is going on? Okay. Global News is reporting. This is May 28th. New Brunswick legislature adjourns as at least 3 MLAs return home after new coronavirus cases. The New Brunswick legislature is adjourned only a few days after it began sitting, a decision that comes after 2 MLAs and the Speaker of the legislature returned home as a result of COVID-19 cases in their community. What are they? Are they doctors? 3 of the provinces, like the most important job, if you're a Walmart worker, is like whatever your Walmart job is, right? Like stocking the shelves or being the cashier. If you say, oh, well, like there's a COVID-19 case in my neighborhood, I'm going to go home now. Like that doesn't help anybody, right? Like your job, Mr. Legislator, is to do the oversight of the spending, is to do the creation of the laws, is to support the people who need the support, and to make sure that the businesses can run in the provinces that you set the laws for. But running away because there's a case in your home, right? What are you going to do? What's the intent here? I'm going to help. I'm going to stand out there at 7 p.m. every day and I'm going to clap at the sky for the healthcare workers. It just doesn't, I don't get it. I don't get it. What are you going to do? Back to this. 3 of the province's most recent confirmed cases of COVID-19 originate in the area of Campbellton, New Brunswick. Guy Arsenault, MLA for Campbellton, Dalhousie, and I think that's Giles, but it might be, I don't know. LePage, MLA for Restugo West, sorry if I've got that wrong, I've definitely got that wrong, issued a joint statement on Thursday saying they have decided to return to their home community. Quote, we have no symptoms, but will self-monitor, the statement said. Here's the statement for immediate release. Okay. We are not aware of any direct contact with the individual who have unfortunately contracted the virus. We have no symptoms, but will self-monitor. So we have no reason to believe that we've been in contact with the sick person. We have no symptoms, but we're going to make sure by going home and self-monitoring. Back to this, which is the advice of Dr. Russell and her team. Like, I wonder if that's direct advice or if that's like the advice just given in the newspaper. Like, if you've been exposed, then this is what you should do. If you think you've been exposed, right? Back to this. As an extra precaution, we'll also call and inquire about getting tested and do so if the advice of the medical professionals, if that's the advice of the medical professionals. We've also decided to return to our community. Unfortunately, it means we won't be attending the legislature for the foreseeable future, but these are unprecedented times, and we both believe it's best we return to our home ridings. Can you do that? Like, dear boss, these are unprecedented times, and I'm going to not do my job right now, and I'm going to go home. Bye. I think there needs to be a better reason for this, New Brunswick. Like, a couple of MLAs just decide that they want to go home, and everybody goes, yep, we're going to call it. That's basically what happened. As a result of the new, I'm back in the Global article here. As a result of the new COVID-19 cluster, the province immediately transitioned Zone 5 back to the orange phase of its COVID-19 recovery plan. Scroll down again. The New Brunswick legislature sitting on Thursday was swift, with all MLAs wearing masks. Speaker Daniel Guthiard, who's the MLA for Restigouche, Charler. Oh man, that's terrible. Which is also in the Campbellton area, was not present on Thursday. Global News was later told that he had returned home to his riding. Instead, Deputy Speaker Chuck Chison, was in the Speaker's chair. He quickly moved for a unanimous vote to adjourn the legislature until September 15th. It quickly passed. The legislature then moved a motion to change the adjournment date until June 9th, unless called back earlier. The legislature has only resumed sitting on Tuesday. All parties in the legislature agreed that the decision to adjourn was necessary to show the public that the coronavirus is still present in New Brunswick. So there's a couple of speakers who left. There's a Speaker of the House and 2 MLAs who left, and then the legislature agreed that we need to stop this unbelievable governing of our province to show that the coronavirus is still here. Yes, it's still here, and so we have to go home, all of us. Back to this quote: "What we're trying to avoid here is a super spreader event," said New Brunswick Green Party leader Davy Kuhn. It is expected that the adjournment will last until June 9th, providing enough time for MLAs to monitor for symptoms. We've got to take all of those steps in a very reasonable, responsible way and follow the directions and directives of public health, said Roger Melson, MLA for Dieppe Centre, Louisville. Okay, I don't see a good reason to shut down the whole legislature when there's a couple of cases popped up, but I'm not public health. I don't know. Global News is reporting further. This is going to Alberta now. Critics describe Premier Jason Kenney's COVID-19 speech as Trumpian. The critic is a Labour person. Labour leader Gil McCowan described the Premier's words as Trumpian. So I just want you to understand, Global News gets a leftist Labour leader to give them a quote and then runs the headline. But this is what Jason Kenney was saying. Quote, or not quote, this is the article. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is being accused of a new dangerous tone when talking about COVID-19. From the Labour leader Gil, the guy I was just talking about. Like, context matters, Global. Anyway, during an emergency debate in the legislature on Wednesday, Kenney referred to the virus as an influenza on multiple occasions. We cannot continue to identify to impair the social and economic as well as mental health and psychological health of the broader population for potentially a year for an influenza that does not generally threaten life apart from the elderly and the immune compromised, the Premier said in the legislature. At another point in his speech, he talked about the relative threat of COVID-19 to the population. And here's the quote. I think this is, oh no, it's not a tweet. The average age of death from COVID in Alberta is 83, and I remind the House that the average life expectancy is 82. So, and I'm not going to get into, I wanted to show you about Mr. Gil McGowan, but interesting the positioning on the Global News article. It gives absolutely nowhere. In fact, it casts doubt on Kenney's claims, but Kenney's claims are correct. This has ravaged long-term care homes, but the rest of the population in Ontario has been largely unaffected, right? And so we are in a situation where the economic impact is going to, and the unintended side consequences are going to be much more impactful, and the economic fallout of this is going to be much more impactful than the virus itself. And yet still, we're closed, right? We still don't have the emergency order lifted. It's still extended till, June 2nd, June 9th, I think, maybe. And why is that? I mean, I think that, not that they overreacted. I think they reacted in a way that the information they had at the time was telling them to react. But now that they did that, I think that they're not willing to admit that that information could have potentially been wrong, or that their public health advice has potentially been overly cautious, right? And it's just, I mean, the economy needs to get going, but the press casting doubt on leaders who are trying to put things into perspective for their populations, like, this is just more fear porn, right? Like, it's just, that's all this is, and it's frustrating. This is just, so have you guys been watching the George Floyd, moving on, the George Floyd stuff? So I think that it's interesting, the riots, right? Like, in the midst of COVID-19, we can't go out to vote, mail-in ballots. We couldn't possibly go outside, everything, like, we've got fines for rollerbladers, right? But you've got riots? So you can have riots, but you can't line up to vote? Like, that's okay, but, like, where's the clusters of COVID-19 from the riots, right? Are we going to see that in 2 weeks? But anyway, regardless of that, up here, apparently, Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh have very short memories, and they're trying to shoehorn in some kind of race narrative that is just non-existent. Well, maybe not non-existent, but it's not endemic. Like, in the southern United States, if you go into a town, there could potentially be, well, I've heard people, my computer froze for a second. I've heard people say that if you go and spend any time in the United States, you understand what racism looks like. And I have not spent a lot of time in the United States, but I'm going to believe them for the minute. And I believe that there's a difference between racism in the United States towards black people specifically and Canada. So I don't know why it keeps freezing. I'm going to try and finish. I know it's long. My computer's complaining. Anyway, here's Justin Trudeau talking about anti-black racism. Here we go.
Anti-black racism is real. It's in the United States, but it's also in Canada. And we know people are facing systemic discrimination, unconscious bias, and anti-black racism.
And I'm just going to leave it there. The whole thing is about anti-black racism, but I think that it's faulty, right? Here's Jagmeet Singh saying the same thing. And it's 22 hours ago. He says, quote, "Many of us are feeling a lot of pain right now. Anti-black and indigenous racism aren't a coincidence." No, it's not a coincidence, Jagmeet. I don't think so either. I really don't. Did you guys put this out yesterday? Yeah, yesterday at roughly the same time, 22 hours ago. It's not a coincidence. I agree with you. You guys are running the same playbook. Do you guys have a private call? Yeah. Anti-black racism, 3, 2, 1, go. I mean, who uses this term? Anti-black racism. Nobody that I know has ever said that other than after today. Anti-black racism. There are decades of policies that have systemically undervalued human life by design, colonialism, underfunding, social exclusion, poverty. Okay, fine. Do you guys not remember this? Like, Canadian stations of the Underground Railroad. Here's a CBC Kids article, and it says, the Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad, but instead a secret network of people known as abolitionists. They were trying to abolish slavery, who helped between 30,000 and 40,000 African Americans escape slavery. Freed slaves would find sanctuary in Canada, as well as some northern states that abolished slavery. So this anti-black racism kick, we went through a period while the United States was, going through slavery, where we were very tolerant. And then just recently, very recently, the last few decades, we snapped back and we've become very racist. Is that what the leadership of the Liberals and the leadership of the NDP think? We're all a bunch of racists that are anti-black? And with that as our history? Come on. Come on. It's just offensive now. It's just offensive. They're rewriting our history to fit current narratives. If you're not Islamophobic, you're anti-black. What? Tone deaf, ridiculous. Lecturing us on this stuff? I mean, seriously. Right? Here's the last two stories. I know I'm 24 minutes? Jeepers creepers. Huawei funding of British and Chinese universities raises security fears. This is a Telegraph, a UK article, but Chinese target organizations like universities, and Canada makes it roll out the red carpet, right? Look at the bio lab. We had Chinese students coming in to help people who were later walked out by our CMP, right? So, I mean, This is happening in our world, and the Canadian press is not interested in reporting on it. And the last story for this morning, Garno says Iran still hasn't released black boxes from airliner shot down in January. I've been talking about this a while. This is from yesterday, May 29th. Today's the 30th. But why are we so bad at international diplomacy, right? China and Canada are having a diplomatic row right now. Iran believes that, shooting down the plane during that whole debacle, which turned into kind of a blip in the wider 2019 2020 world, they're I don't know, immune to any kind of accountability, kind of like our government, I guess, right? I wonder if Trudeau will fly over there again and shake everybody's hand in another aftermath, right? Like he did that right after this happened. He was shaking everybody's hand. I don't know. I wonder who gave Sophie COVID-19. But it's very interesting how what's happening on the world stage, both from Donald Trump and the defunding of the WHO to China to Iran, is kind of swirling, and Canadians are totally fine with our government being completely MIA, right? Like 4 sittings, and one of those sittings has to deal with billions in spending, and we get 4 hours, and nobody's upset about that. Not one person's upset. The most problematic thing is the racism, anti-black racism. Are you kidding me? Are you really seriously? This is the problem? CBC Kids, guys. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Kelly and I had a very interesting conversation the other day. I had a lot of fun, and we'll be probably doing it again on Thursday. Maybe. We'll see. And have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.